The next storyteller is absolutely fantastic. Karen lives in Bellingham with her husband and boys and 3 extremely well-socialized chickens. Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for our next storyteller before we take a short break. And I don't actually think I have her last name here. Karen!
That was loud. Hi.
Hi.
My story begins with a knock. A knock on the driver's side window of our battered, completely dead Ford Country Squire station wagon. And this knock comes at about hour 54 in what should have been an 8-hour drive from our home here in Massachusetts up to visit relatives in Montreal, Canada. It's a few days before Christmas, and I'm 9 years old. And the guy knocking is this huge, hulking man. And I have to say, this story starts for me with the knock. His car is pulled up behind us on this very barren, extremely cold, very dark road in an area that we always called silo country growing up. It's sort of this area between the border, the US border, and Montreal itself. And so my mother kind of rolls down the window, and this man, this huge guy, says, "My friends and I noticed the flames coming out of your tailpipe back at the border. Can we take you further along, on your trip?" So I just want to paint this picture for you. It is freezing cold, there's a lot of snow, there's like no trees. Picture just a barren wasteland. In the summer it's probably nice and farmy, but right now it's just not. There's one lone farmhouse that we can see, and there was no help at that farmhouse. And my mother's been in the car with us kids for more than 2 days now, and she is at her wit's end. She has no other options, and she's really worried. She's like, is this guy gonna rape me? This big huge guy, or his friend's gonna kidnap or kill my children? But she doesn't have any other options. She's really got to say yes. So she says, sure. And we leave our Ford Country Squire station wagon, and we put ourselves into the power of this man and his companions. So at this time, you might be wondering how we got to this point. Every Christmas growing up, my mother could spend 1 week with her family. That was it. We were the only branch that moved down here, and there's barely long distance phone. This is 1980, so there'd be all these arguments about how many minutes you spent on the phone and stuff like that. This is her one chance to be with all of her sisters and brothers and her parents and relatives. And unfortunately, in hour 1 of this trip, we got into a car accident. We skidded on black ice just an hour from home, and I remember my mother yelling, "You guys, duck!" And because you're not wearing a seatbelt, or you're not into a harness in 1980. So I take the back seat, and my brother lies down on the floor. My 6-7-year-old brother lies down on the floor of the back, and then our 2-year-old brother is kind of knocking around in the way back. As we skid on this black ice, we hit the guardrail, we spin, we hit it again, and we're shaken up, but we're still going to go on this trip. There is no way my mother is. The car is drivable, we're doing it. So we get back in the car, and then the car does start to develop some problems. We spend that night broken down in a motel in New Hampshire. So then yesterday, the car gets fixed in New Hampshire, and we get on our way again, and we make it all the way to Burlington, Vermont, and the car dies in Burlington again. And I have this memory of my mother and holding my 2-year-old brother as she walks away and leaves my 7-year-old brother and I sitting in this car in the middle of the city of Burlington at an intersection. Because she's gone off to get a tow truck, and she didn't want to take all of us with her. So we spent last night in Burlington. And then today we waited around pretty much all day for the mechanics to fix it again. And it's pronounced fixed just about dusk. So we get back in the car, and then we soon discover that it's actually not really fixed. It's got these funny noises coming out of it. At the border, as we spoke about before, there were flames coming out of the tailpipe. There's one stop sign in, I swear, the whole of silo country. And as my mother is pulling away from this one stop sign, we hear this tremendous bang. And these 2 people walking behind us, hit the deck. They think that they have been shot at by like a rifle. I mean, it's really bad. So then a few miles from there, the car finally just dies. And now that's where we are with this big, gigantic guy, inviting us into his car. So my mother, of course, says sure, and we get into his green sedan. We say goodbye to our Ford Country Squire. And my mom is crammed into the front with Felix, who's the guy, the big guy. And she and my 2-year-old brother are between Felix and his wife, Victoria. And my brother, Rob, my 7-year-old brother, and I are each on the lap of a person in back. I can't remember their names, but anyway. We each have a big, gigantic, mine is a giant stuffed dog, and my brother's is a giant stuffed teddy bear. And so they're on our laps as we're on their laps. And we're all crammed into this car, and there's hot chocolate being passed around, which is really, really welcome. We each take our sip of hot chocolate, and when it gets to my mother, she nearly spits it out, because it's like 90% alcohol. And she's thinking, oh my God, my kids are drinking this. What have we got ourselves into? And we're on our way to a place that's about an hour away from Montreal. It's called Nuns Island. The people, Felix, Victoria, and the people in back, are staying there just for Christmas. They actually live, it turns out, in Connecticut. And so they're saying to my mom, it's going to be all right. You're going to be able to get to our condo, and you're going to call your dad, and he's going to come and get you. And we get there, and my mom calls my grandfather. Let me just say a word about my grandfather. He is a wonderful man, and I loved him dearly, and I know that he loved me and my mother and my brothers. But guess what he said? It's midnight, it's cold, it's late. My grandfather says, no, I'm not coming to get you. Take a cab, it's too late. So now we're in the kitchen, my mother is crying. We don't know what we're gonna do. I mean, what the heck do we do at this point, right? And Felix takes his keys and holds them out to my mother and says, take our car. And my mom says, we can't do that, we can't take your car. And he says, absolutely, you are taking these keys, you are going home to your family tonight. And so we do. And these people are like our saviors, this is amazing. And we connect with them the next day, the grown-ups kind of, talk to each other. And in fact, Felix and Victoria and the other couple come to our big New Year's party that we have every year. And the grown-ups exchange, contact information. And they live so close to us, they're only in Connecticut. And our car gets fixed, and we have a really nice trip, and we get home safely. And this is where my story gets really interesting. At the beginning, when Felix knocked on our door, I really felt like he'd fallen from the sky. Like, I didn't remember the car behind us in Silo Country, but they were there. And so my story started with that knock. It ends with my mother standing at our mailbox. The mailbox is open, and she's really perplexed, because this is like the third notice that she's gotten. She's tried to send them flowers. She's tried to send thank you notes. She's tried to send cards. And she keeps getting replies back that there's no such person. There's no such address. They're not there. They don't exist. And for me, this feels like a real Christmas miracle. They dropped out of the sky. They came into existence at our most challenging, toughest point on this trip, this crazy trip. And then they saw us safely to our grandparents' house, and then they have disappeared in like a puff of smoke. And that's why we call them our angels.
I have her last name, folks. Karen LaCope, everybody.